I think I might just hold the unofficial world record for the most audacious, and frankly, the most expensive private toll road ever conceived. And the story of how it came to be is something you truly have to hear to believe. Or, then again, maybe you will believe it, especially if you've ever had the distinct displeasure of tangling with a homeowners association. One of those little fiefdoms run by someone with too much time on their hands and an ego the size of Texas. Drop a comment and let me know where you're watching from today, because I promise you, this tale of suburban warfare, blatant trespassing, and sweet, financially punitive justice is going to be one for the books. It all started not with a bang, but with a bulldozer on my land, my private ranch land, that's been in my family for 3 generations. My grandfather bought this spread back when this whole area was nothing but rolling hills and cattle, long before any developer had the bright idea to cram 1,000 identical houses onto a postage stamp next door. I grew up here riding horses, fixing fences, learning every creek and contour of this land until it was as much a part of me as my own skin. After a long career as a civil engineer, specializing in infrastructure projects, I'd retired back to the ranch, looking forward to some peace, quiet, and the familiar rhythm of the seasons. The peace lasted about 5 years. That's when Harmony Meadows, as they ironically called it, started sprouting up on the adjacent parcel, a massive development that fundamentally changed the landscape and, as it turned out, my life. The first sign of trouble was subtle, just the occasional surveyor's stake appearing suspiciously close to my fence line. Then came the letters, polite but increasingly insistent, from the Harmony Meadows HOA. Their president, a woman named Brenda McMillan, and you can just picture her, can't you? Perfectly coiffed silver hair that looked like it could withstand a hurricane, expensive pastel pantsuits that probably cost more than my monthly mortgage payment used to, and a perpetually pinched expression as if she'd just sniffed something foul, which, in retrospect, was probably me and my ranch. She drove a gleaming white Lexus SUV, the kind that's always immaculately clean, and she had this way of talking down to you, even when she was ostensibly asking for a favor. Their initial request, delivered via a crisply printed letter on thick, creamy stationery, was for an easement. They wanted to build an access road across a northern sliver of my property, arguing it would provide a more direct route for their residents and, crucially, for emergency services. I politely declined. My reasons were straightforward. The proposed route cut through a sensitive riparian area I'd spent years restoring. It would compromise the privacy and security of my homestead, and frankly, they already had perfectly adequate, albeit slightly longer, access to the main county road via their own property frontage. I even pointed out on their own development plans where their designated access point was. I thought that was the end of it. Naive, I know. Brenda, however, was not a woman accustomed to taking no for an answer, especially not from someone she clearly viewed as a relic from a bygone era, an obstacle to her vision of suburban perfection. The whispers started soon after. One of my old ranch hands, whose cousin worked on the Harmony Meadows landscaping crew, told me Brenda had been heard at an HOA meeting proclaiming that some people just don't understand progress, and that they would find a way. I started seeing her Lexus driving slowly along the county road, bordering my property, her head swiveling, eyes scanning my fence line like a predator sizing up prey. Then, one blustery Tuesday morning, I was out checking the northern pasture, the one that bordered Harmony Meadows. The air was crisp, the sky a pale, washed-out blue, and the distant sound of construction from their development was a constant, irritating hum. But as I crested a small rise, the hum became a roar, and my blood ran cold. There, not 50 yards inside my clearly marked and well-maintained fence line, was a bulldozer, its blade tearing into the earth, carving a wide, muddy scar across my land. Behind it, a crew of men were already laying down gravel. They weren't just close to my property, they were unequivocally, brazenly on it. My heart hammered against my ribs, a sickening cocktail of disbelief and white-hot fury rising in my throat. They were actually doing it. They were building their damned road right through my ranch. The sight of that bulldozer gouging a path through my pasture, a piece of land I'd known and cared for my entire life, was like a physical blow. For a moment, I was rooted to the spot, the sheer audacity of it stunning me into silence. Then, the engineer in me, The man who understood property lines, contracts, and the rule of law was overwhelmed by the rancher, the man whose territory was being invaded. I vaulted the nearest fence. Not as spryly as I used to, mind you, but adrenaline is a powerful motivator, and marched towards the construction crew, my voice, when I found it, tight with anger. "What in the Sam Hill do you think you're doing?" I yelled over the roar of the diesel engine. The bulldozer operator, a burly guy in a stained t-shirt, glanced down at me, then cut the engine. The sudden silence was almost deafening, broken only by the chirping of birds and the nervous shuffling of the ground crew. "We're putting in the access road, old-timer," he said, a smirk playing on his lips. "Orders from the HOA." I pointed towards my fence line, now a mangled heap of wire and posts where they'd driven straight through. "This is private property, my property. You are trespassing and you are causing significant damage." The foreman, a wiry man with a clipboard, ambled over. He had that look of someone who knew they were in the wrong but was getting paid to do it anyway. "Look, buddy," he said, not unkindly but firmly, "we just follow the plans. Got a work order signed by the Harmony Meadows HOA. Says this is where the road goes." He actually showed me the flimsy work order, a poorly photocopied map with a thick red line drawn unceremoniously across a crude representation of my land. There was no easement number, no county approval stamp, nothing that looked remotely official. It was, in essence, a wish list on paper. My first call, made right there in the pasture with the scent of diesel and freshly turned earth stinging my nostrils, was to my lawyer, Tom Callister. Tom was a sharp, no-nonsense attorney who'd handled land issues in our county for decades. I explained the situation, my voice still shaking with a mixture of rage and disbelief. Tom's reaction was a low whistle, followed by a string of rather colorful legal expletives I won't repeat here. "They've done what?" he exclaimed. "Without an easement? Without a court order? Mike, that's not just trespass, that's grand larceny of land use, if there were such a term. They're certifiably insane." He promised to draft an immediate cease and desist letter and have it served on Brenda McMillan and the entire HOA board by the end of the day. He also advised me to meticulously document everything, take photos, videos, note down times, dates, and the names of any personnel on site. This was where my engineering background kicked in. I went back to my workshop, grabbed my high-resolution camera, my GPS surveyor's kit, and a notepad. For the next 3 hours, I became a one-man forensic documentation unit. I photographed every inch of the damage, the equipment, the smug faces of the crew who, after a brief pause, had restarted their destructive work under the foreman's renewed, if somewhat hesitant, direction. I took GPS readings of my property corners, matching them against my official plat maps. The incursion was blatant, nearly 100 feet deep into my land along a quarter-mile stretch. The cease and desist letter, hand-delivered by a very stern-looking courier to Brenda McMillan herself as she was exiting a Pilates class, Tom had a flair for the dramatic, seemed to have all the impact of a spitball against a battleship. Construction didn't even pause. In fact, it accelerated. And then came the kicker, the move that truly defined their arrogance and, ultimately, sealed their fate. A few days later, I noticed a different kind of construction activity over on the Harmony Meadows side. They were demolishing their original access road, the slightly inconvenient but perfectly functional route that connected them to the county highway. They were, quite literally, burning their bridges, or in this case, bulldozing their asphalt. It was an act of such supreme, pig-headed confidence in their illegal land grab that it left me momentarily speechless. They were making the road through my ranch, not just their preferred route, but their only route. My lawyer, Tom, was equally aghast and, I sensed, a little gleeful from a legal standpoint. "They're fools, Mike," he said over the phone. "Absolute, unadulterated fools. They've just handed us leverage on a silver platter. They're boxing themselves in." But the legal process, as I was quickly learning, was a slow, grinding machine. While Tom filed for an emergency injunction, the road through my land progressed with alarming speed. Trucks laden with gravel rumbled back and forth, compactors pounded the earth, and the once peaceful northern pasture began to look like a highway construction zone. The emotional toll was immense. Sleep became a luxury, my days consumed by phone calls with Tom, documenting the ongoing destruction and a simmering rage that never quite went away. Some of the Harmony Meadows residents, I heard through the grapevine, were starting to get nervous. They'd see me out there, a grim-faced man with a camera, and a few even had the decency to look ashamed. But Brenda McMillan, I was told, was doubling down, spinning tales at HOA meetings about my being an unreasonable recluse holding up vital progress, even hinting that the new road was essential for critical emergency vehicle access, a claim that was patently false given their prior perfectly adequate road. The lines weren't just drawn, they were being carved into my land with steel and diesel, and I was starting to feel like David facing a very arrogant, very well-funded, and very stupid Goliath. The day the Harmony Meadows HOA officially opened their illegally constructed road across my ranch, they actually had the gall to string up a cheap plastic banner between two traffic cones at their end of it. I watched through binoculars from my porch as Brenda McMillan, resplendent in a canary yellow pantsuit that did her no favors, cut the banner with a pair of oversized novelty scissors. A small, somewhat subdued crowd of about 30 HOA residents clapped politely. They probably thought they'd won, that the old rancher had finally been steamrolled by the inevitable march of progress. They had no idea what was coming. My lawyer, Tom, had advised a period of strategic patience. "Let them use it, Mike," he'd said, a predatory glint in his eye. "Let them get used to it. Let them become completely dependent on it, especially now that they've been idiotic enough to demolish their own legal access. We'll hit them when it hurts most." And so I watched. I watched as the first tentative cars trickled down the new road, then as the trickle became a steady stream. Morning and evening there was a parade of SUVs, minivans, and contractor trucks, all taking their convenient shortcut through my property, saving themselves perhaps 3 whole minutes of driving time. The dust they kicked up coated my fences, the noise shattered the morning quiet, and with every passing vehicle my resolve hardened. The legal battle for the injunction was dragging on, mired in procedural delays that Brenda's high-priced lawyers seemed adept at creating. It was frustrating, but I trusted Tom's strategy. The idea, when it finally crystallized, was so audacious, so beautifully simple in its execution that I almost laughed out loud. If they wanted to use my road, they were going to pay for it. Not a token fee, not a polite request for contribution, but a toll. A very, very significant toll. I wasn't just going to reclaim my land. I was going to make them rue the day they ever thought they could cross Mike Tanner. I sat down with Tom and pitched it to him. Tollbooths, Tom. Right at the edge of my property line on their new road. Professional grade. And a hefty access fee. Tom leaned back in his chair, a slow grin spreading across his face. "Mike," he said, "that is inspired. Legally, as long as it's clearly on your land, and the signage is unambiguous, you can charge whatever you want for permissive access. There's still trespassing, of course, but if they choose to pay for that trespass instead of turning around, well, that's their prerogative." He cautioned that we needed to be meticulous. Every I dotted, every T crossed. We couldn't afford any missteps that would give Brenda's legal eagles an opening. This was where my background as a civil engineer and project manager truly came into its own. I didn't want flimsy barricades, they could just drive around. I envisioned proper, automated toll booths, the kind you see on actual highways, complete with barrier arms, card readers, and very clear signage. I spent weeks researching. I contacted a company that specialized in access control systems, explaining my unique requirements. They were, understandably, a little perplexed at first. A private toll road on a ranch charging an exorbitant fee, but a contract is a contract, and my money was good. I designed the layout myself, 2 lanes, 1 in each direction, positioned just inside my property line, ensuring anyone entering or leaving Harmony Meadows via that route would have to pass through them. I specified heavy-duty steel construction, reinforced barrier arms, and high-definition security cameras covering every angle, all feeding back to a recording system in my workshop. This wasn't just about collecting tolls, it was about making an unshakable statement. The installation was planned with military precision. I hired a local trusted contractor, a man whose father had worked for my father on the ranch years ago. We waited for a moonless night, a Friday, when activity in Harmony Meadows typically died down early. Under the cover of darkness, a flatbed truck carrying the prefabricated toll booth structures rumbled quietly down my private farm track, its lights dimmed. My contractor and his small loyal crew worked with incredible efficiency. There were no loud power tools, just the quiet hum of a generator, the clinking of metal, and hushed instructions. We had concrete pads pre-poured and cured weeks in advance, disguised as bases for new water troughs. The booths were craned into place, bolted down, and the electrical systems connected. By 4 a.m., as the first hint of dawn was touching the eastern sky, it was done. Two gleaming, formidable toll booths stood sentinel on the illicit road. Large, professionally printed signs were erected: private property, no unauthorized access fee, $1,000 per vehicle per entry, all transactions recorded. Violators will be prosecuted for trespassing. I even had smaller signs detailing payment methods, credit card only for traceability. I stood there for a long moment as the sun began to rise, a cold satisfaction settling in my chest. The trap was set. All that remained was to wait for the first unsuspecting customer. The quiet before the storm was almost palpable. I remember thinking, Brenda, you have no idea what's about to hit your perfect little world. This was more than just reclaiming land. This was a lesson in consequences, delivered with cold, hard, financial precision. The first sign of the impending chaos came around 6:30 a.m. on Saturday morning. I was in my kitchen, sipping coffee and watching the live feed from the security cameras I'd strategically positioned around the new toll booths. A sleek black BMW, probably heading out for an early golf game, turned off the main Harmony Meadows thoroughfare and onto the disputed road. The driver, a man in a polo shirt, was chatting on his phone, not paying much attention until his expensive German sedan was practically nose to grill with my brand new VZV ride tension. VZVZV. The driver, a man in a polo shirt, was practically nose to grill with my brand new Velusay.tum, very official looking toll barrier. I saw him brake sharply, his head snapping up. The confusion on his face, even on the grainy monitor, was delicious. He leaned out the window, gesticulating. Then he saw the sign. $1,000 per entry. I could almost hear the shriek of disbelief from half a mile away. He backed up, nearly hitting the curb, executed a clumsy three-point turn, and sped back into Harmony Meadows, undoubtedly to spread the word. It was like poking a hornet's nest with a very expensive stick. Within 20 minutes, the calls started. Not to me initially, but to the Harmony Meadows security gate, then presumably to Brenda McMillan. By 7:30 a.m., a small convoy of vehicles had assembled on their side of my new toll plaza. People were out of their cars, shouting, pointing, their faces contorted with outrage. It was beautiful. The star of the show, Brenda McMillan herself, arrived around 8 a.m., her white Lexus screeching to a halt just inches from the barrier arm. She practically vaulted out of the car, her face a mask of incandescent fury, her perfectly coiffed hair looking slightly askew for the first time since I'd known her. She marched straight up to the toll booth, which was, of course, unmanned and automated. She banged on the steel casing. "Open this ridiculous thing at once!" she shrieked, to no one in particular. "This is an outrage! This is illegal!" That was my cue. I'd driven down in my old ranch truck and parked a discreet distance away, just inside my property line, with Tom Callister sitting beside me, looking like a kid on Christmas morning. I strolled over, hands in my pockets, affecting an air of calm bemusement. "Morning, Brenda," I said, my voice deliberately mild. "Having a bit of trouble there?" Her head whipped around, eyes blazing. "Tanner, you are behind this monstrosity. You take this illegal obstruction down this instant. We have a right to use this road." "Actually, Brenda," I replied, gesturing to the clearly marked fence line a few feet behind the booths, "this is my private property. And this," I patted the cool steel of the toll booth, "is my private access control system. The road your association illegally constructed is also on my private property. If you and your residents wish to use my private road, the access fee is $1,000 per entry. Credit card only, if you please. We aim for convenience." Tom stepped forward, handing her a neatly printed card. "Brenda McMillan, I presume? Tom Callister, Mr. Tanner's attorney? Perhaps you'd like to discuss this with your legal counsel. My client is well within his rights to control access to his own land, especially given the rather egregious trespass that has occurred and, notably, The fact that your HOA thoughtfully demolished its only other viable access route, making you entirely dependent on Mr. Prime, Tanner's goodwill, or in this case, his fee schedule. Brenda sputtered, words failing her. Several other HOA residents, emboldened by her presence, started yelling, "This is extortion," one man in a jogging suit bellowed. "We'll sue you into the ground," screamed a woman clutching a tiny yapping dog. "You can't do this." Brenda, recovering her voice, whipped out her phone. "I'm calling the police. This is a public nuisance. You're blocking a public thoroughfare." "Actually," I interjected calmly, "it's a private road on private land that your HOA built without permission, and you're welcome to call the sheriff. I have all my documentation ready." She did call them. Two county sheriff's deputies arrived about 30 minutes later, looking distinctly unimpressed to be dragged into a Saturday morning HOA dispute. Brenda launched into a tirade, pointing, gesticulating, her voice rising in pitch. When she finally paused for breath, I calmly presented the deputies with my notarized deed, my official survey plat maps clearly showing the road was entirely on my land, copies of the ignored cease and desist letters, and photographic evidence of the illegal construction. I explained that the HOA had also, foolishly, demolished their own legal access road. Deputy Miller, the senior of the two, scratched his chin. He looked at my papers, then at the irate crowd, then back at me. "Well, ma'am," he said to Brenda, "as far as I can tell, this is Mr. Tanner's property. If he wants to charge for access, that's his business. This appears to be a civil matter, not a criminal one. We can't force him to remove his structures from his own land." Brenda's face went from puce to a ghastly white. The collective groan from the assembled HOA residents was audible. This was a massive, public blow to her authority. The deputies advised everyone to remain calm and disperse, then they got back in their cruiser and left. The sight of that departing police car seemed to drain the remaining fight out of the crowd. They stood around, muttering, defeated. A few even glared at Brenda. The $1,000 toll suddenly seemed very real, and their only convenient way in or out of Harmony Meadows was now firmly behind a paywall. The local news affiliate, tipped off by an enterprising resident with a smartphone, arrived just as the deputies were leaving, their news van pulling up with a cameraman already filming. Brenda McMillan looked like she wanted the earth to swallow her whole. The leverage Tom had spoken of wasn't just on a silver platter anymore, it was a 5-course meal, and I was just starting to enjoy the appetizer. The days that followed were a masterclass in impotent rage and dawning realization from the Harmony Meadows HOA. Brenda McMillan, humiliated but not yet entirely defeated, sicked her lawyers on me with a flurry of threatening letters. They demanded the immediate removal of the illegal tolling infrastructure, citing obscure county ordinances that Tom Callister swatted away like flies. They threatened to sue for disruption of essential services and emotional distress to the residents of Harmony Meadows. Tom's responses were always polite, legally impeccable, and utterly unyielding. He pointed out repeatedly that the essential service was on my land, and the distress was a direct consequence of their own illegal actions and subsequent strategic blunder of demolishing their own access. Meanwhile, the toll booths remained silent, implacable, and very, very expensive. Not a single resident, to my knowledge, actually paid the $1,000 fee. Instead, Harmony Meadows became a scene of logistical chaos. Residents were forced to use a convoluted series of back roads and unpaved service lanes that circled the far side of their development, adding 20 to 30 minutes to any journey. Contractor trucks got stuck, delivery services refused to enter, and tempers frayed. The blame, initially directed at me, began to shift squarely onto Brenda and the HOA board that had enabled her. My high-definition cameras, by the way, captured a few instances of late-night attempted vandalism on the toll booths, some spray paint, a few kicks. Each incident was meticulously recorded, and the repair bills, along with clear footage, were forwarded to the HOA's legal counsel with a polite note from Tom suggesting they might want to advise their clients about the penalties for property damage and enhanced trespassing. The vandalism stopped abruptly. The real turning point came during an emergency HOA meeting, a recording of which was anonymously mailed to me. Bless the disgruntled souls in Harmony Meadows. Brenda, apparently, tried to rally the residents, proposing they pool funds to fight me in court indefinitely. That's when a previously quiet board member, a retired accountant named Arthur Jenkins, finally spoke up. According to the muffled recording, Arthur calmly laid out the HOA's financial situation, the mounting legal bills, and the potential massive liability they faced if I countersued for damages, which Tom had already indicated was our next step. He pointed out that their own lawyer had likely advised them their case was, to put it mildly, weak. The phrase catastrophic misjudgment was used several times, reportedly directed at Brenda. The support for her hardline stance evaporated. Within a week, I received a formal request, not from Brenda, but from Mr. Blank, Arthur Jenkins, acting as interim HOA president, requesting a meeting to discuss a mutually agreeable resolution. Brenda, it turned out, had been quietly forced to take an indefinite leave of absence. The negotiation, when it happened, was held in Tom's office. I sat there saying very little while Tom laid out our terms. There were no smiles, no pleasantries. We weren't looking for an apology, we were looking for restitution and an end to the nonsense. My terms were non-negotiable. First, full and complete restoration of my land where the road had been built, to its original condition, at their expense, supervised by an independent environmental consultant of my choosing. Second, they were to pay for all my legal fees, the cost of the toll booth installation and removal, once restoration was complete, and a significant 5-figure sum for damages, trespass, and the sheer unmitigated gall they'd displayed. Third, they were to immediately begin reconstruction of their original legal access road, also at their expense. And fourth, a public, written apology from the HOA to me, to be published in the local paper. Arthur Jenkins, to his credit, didn't try to haggle much. He looked tired, beaten, and profoundly embarrassed by the whole affair. He knew they were caught, and he just wanted it to be over. The HOA board, minus Brenda, ratified the agreement within days. The toll booths remained up, a silent reminder of their folly, until the first major payment installment cleared and the contracts for the restoration work were signed. The day the bulldozers returned, this time to rip out the illegal road under the watchful eye of my chosen consultant, was a day of quiet triumph. It took weeks to remove the asphalt and gravel, regrade the land, and replant native grasses and shrubs. The HOA also had to scramble to rebuild their old access road, a project that cost them dearly in rush fees and overtime. Brenda McMillan, I heard, sold her house in Harmony Meadows, at a loss, reportedly, and moved out of state. The HOA itself underwent a complete overhaul, with a new board committed to, as Arthur Jenkins put it in their public apology, respecting property boundaries and fostering good neighborly relations. The apology, when it appeared in the Anytown Gazette, was prominently displayed. I framed it. As for the money from the settlement, after Tom's fees and my expenses, a good portion went into a local land conservancy trust I helped establish, dedicated to preserving open spaces from exactly the kind of overzealous development that had caused all this trouble. The rest? Well, let's just say my ranch has a new, very secure state-of-the-art fencing system, and I might have upgraded my old truck. The peace and quiet has mostly returned to my northern pasture, though sometimes, when the wind is just right, I swear I can still hear the faint, ghostly echo of Brenda McMillan's outraged shrieks. And you know what? It always brings a smile to my face. So, if you ever find yourself dealing with an HOA that thinks it can just walk all over you, remember this story. Sometimes, a well-placed toll booth, metaphorically or literally, is all it takes to remind them exactly where the line is drawn. Thanks for listening to my little saga. Drop a like if you enjoyed it, and maybe share it with anyone who's ever had a run-in with unchecked power. You never know who might need to hear that the little guy, with a bit of planning and a whole lot of resolve, can still win.